before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay respects to the elders past and present. Palestine, 1947. The UN approves and divides Palestine into Jewish and Arab states. The green highlighted areas show what are considered Palestinian land. 2017, the green highlighted areas are what are considered Palestinian land today. Now, this may not seem to impact you. We seem to forget and neglect the impacts of war when it doesn't impact us directly. But what if it did? In 1947, Australia would be divided into two separate states. The green highlighted areas that are shown would be considered Australian land. 2017, the green highlighted areas are what would be considered Australian land today. War causes poverty, mental illness, destruction, hatred, separation and death. And all these things drive me to produce my art based on war, the creator of problems, solver of none. My name is Marwa Charmand. I'm the second youngest of 5 kids. Pictured with me, my sisters Saraya, Layla, Miriam, and my younger brother Mohammed. And if you're thinking, why don't I look like them? I've got no idea either. So, I'm pretty sure my parents knew from a long time ago that I wasn't going to grow up to be a makeup artist. But it didn't take them too long to finally figure out where I'd be heading. So, why and how art? I honestly don't know. It's something I've done for a long time as I was a kid, and I continue to do it. It was the one thing I was good at, and it was the only thing people couldn't tell me I was doing wrong, so I kind of liked that. Now, in high school, I wasn't really good at any subjects. Pretty much art was the only thing that I kind of went well in. In all the other classes, I would just sit and draw, and when I would hand in my books, my teachers would just find a pile of pictures, and they weren't very impressed. In my last year of high school, I was introduced to the artist that influenced me the most till this very day. Australian war artist and filmmaker George Giddos. His work is nothing like I've ever seen before, and I love that he focuses on social issues such as war and poverty. As soon as I saw this picture, I realised that this is what I wanted to do. After seeing this picture, I too have forever strived to produce art with purpose and for change. Now, after high school, I wanted to work with tigers. That was what I wanted to do. So I told my mum I'd be enrolling into animal studies, and my mum took one look at me and said, okay, but enroll in art. And I said, no, but I want to work with big cats. And she said, that's fine, just enroll in art. So I was like, okay, Mum, I'll prove you wrong and I'll do both. So 3 years later, I would graduate with an advanced diploma in fine arts. Thanks, Mum. Now, I didn't always listen to my mum. I was one of those kids where as soon as you hear the words back in my day, it was kind of like a why me moment. Why am I being punished? I don't want to listen to this. But in a few years' time, I would come to love, respect and honour their stories. Good old Daddy-O. So I learned that my dad was born in Lebanon and immigrated to Australia in his early 20s. He lived through times of war, and my dad and my mother went for days without food, water, electricity in school. My dad was only 20 years old when he packed his things and moved to the other side of the world with what he says was $22.50 to his name. We still question that though. Australia was empty. They used to hand out visas like it was nothing. They used to beg people to come here to help fill it up. That's how my dad said how easy immigration was back when he came. Now, fast forward a few decades, and boy, has that changed. My mother also witnessed and experienced many wars before her immigration at the age of 23. She forever heard sounds of guns and missiles, which would become her daily soundtrack. She told me that snipers would fill empty apartments and shoot at children on the way to school when collecting water. She said if you left the house, there was no guarantee you would ever return home. In 2012, I was fortunate enough to be part of the No Added Sugar exhibition at the Kusula Powerhouse Arts Centre. I chose to share their stories through my work. Now, I was lucky and fortunate enough to share their stories, but who will hear and share the stories of others? It can be said that today we live in a world where we communicate images, and though they say an image tells 1,000 words, today it must grab our attention in order to do so. So I constantly challenge myself to find new ways and perspectives in order to do this, to address my art on war. I research and read about a lot of things, a lot, to the point where people find it a bit strange. But I think my family are used to it by now. But I feel like this method keeps me aware and opens new realms for my future work. And after researching recent war crimes, I felt it was important to not only discuss the effects of war, but also the time. Also, throughout my research, I learned that we are told to upgrade everything. Our phones, TVs, software, cars, furniture, whatever you want, it has an upgrade. So I thought, why should art be the exception to the rule? I was first introduced to Kathy Kollwitz back in high school, a German-born artist who was well known for her emotional works. Her most memorable works were produced in the late 1800s and early 1900s. We are now in 2017. And to think some of her most memorable works were created over 100 years ago. Yet the problems of war are still being felt till this very day. 100 years ago, just sort of let that sink in. It blows my mind, it frustrates me, but mostly it makes me angry. So I dedicate my practice to all the unheard victims of war. My new series of work are an updated series of Kathy Kollwitz's past works. I've chosen and updated 4 of her works to show how over 100 years on, these issues are still relevant today. My first large-scale drawing is taken from Kathy Kollwitz's print, Karl Liebknecht Memorial, a woodblock print created in 1919 and 1920. This work was produced after the well-known communist leader was assassinated. She created this piece not only addressing the communist leader at the time, but also his followers who had come to pay their respects. My piece, The Memoriam for the Unknown, is a memorial dedicated to all the unknown and nameless victims, nameless people that have died as a result of war. The surrounding people have still come to pay their respects, but are also left behind to suffer the after effects of war. The deceased figure has been updated to a child to show that war knows no boundaries. My second large-scale drawing references Kathy Kollwitz, The Survivors. It was produced in 1923. She created this poster depicting the displacement of war. The mother in the centre is surrounded by 11 figures, and she's seen as a protector to the young children at the bottom half of the image. My piece, The Dead, is simply an opposite update of the work. This piece was also influenced by the stories in which my mother and father shared of people, not only individuals, but families and generations that had been completely wiped out in the war. The stories of the unknown victims are forever lost in the arms of death, and it is as if the skull is looking at us and laughing at our treatment of one another. Now, if you are familiar with Kathy Kollwitz, when I said her name, the first work that probably came to mind was this, Mother with Dead Child. It was an etching created in 1903. She depicted the traumatic loss of a child and the mother and his mother mourning. At the time she created this piece, she actually hadn't felt what it was like to lose a child. But it wasn't too long before her son Peter, who actually posed for the very same picture at the age of 7, was killed in World War I, and her grandson was killed in World War II. My piece, Father and Dead Child, is an updated piece about the very same emotions. Today we know that as a result, war is causing not only the loss of one child, but multiple. And also that fathers are also people who suffer and mourn as a result. Now, this was seen in recent attacks, in chemical attacks in Syria. This image emerged showing a father holding his deceased twins who were killed in the attack. After these attacks, I was angered and moved at the fact that the world didn't stop and think of the tragedy that had occurred. The attack received little to no attention time on our media platforms compared to what happens in our Western world. Now, I know this may cause some arguments. However, thanks to my sister Miriam, the greatest thing she ever taught me when I went to uni was that if you have a point, prove it. So, here it is. An article written by the ABC that says the very same thing. Little outrage caused by the attacks. But to compare it more recently, I'm sure we are all aware of the attacks that happened in Manchester this week. In fact, I'm so sure we are all aware that I don't need to show an article or a picture about it. But did you hear that on the very same day there was also a car bomb in Syria that left 4 dead and injured 32? This is why media platforms play a huge role. I believe it is important to discuss different perspectives of war other than what is selected and edited on our media platforms. Now, this issue isn't limited to our media, but also in the words of our leader. After the attacks in Syria that left the chemical attacks in Syria that left numerous children dead, with the most disturbing footage shown of innocent children gasping for life, our Prime Minister said that the use of chemical attacks was illegal and abhorrent. Yet after the tragic events in Manchester, our Prime Minister said an attack on innocents and that there was no crime more reprehensible than the murder of children. Now, why both events are as tragic as each other, why wasn't the event in Syria considered an attack on innocents or considered a disgraceful murder of children? Now, I'm not here to argue and tell you which event is worse than the other. I'm here to say that it all matters. Here, there, anywhere. We must be aware that war isn't limited to what our media platforms. We just need to find the truth and expose it. So my last piece is influenced by Kathy Coe's Infant Mortality that depicts a mother's despair at her baby's death through intense blackness. My work, 92, are woodblock prints that depict recent chemical attacks. I in fact created 92 prints that show the 92 years since Kathy Coe produced her piece. This shows the timeline from when she produced War and Art to when I am producing War and Art, and still nothing has changed. The issue is there. This work is dedicated not only to the chemical attack victims, but to all people around the world who have suffered at the effect of war and conflict. Now, I've been addressing this issue for nearly 10 years now, and I'm still asked over and over again why I never changed my stuff. And it took me many years for me to even know. But the simple answer is this: if not me, then who? And that's not to say that there are no other artists addressing this, but it is also an answer to myself. I can't expect people to go out and do work about my opinion, so I do it. It is the only way I know and the best way that I can. And I urge people to be more aware of our surroundings and look beyond our media platforms and look for the truth and expose it. I hope to inspire everyone and anyone to use their discipline to create for peace, to all and for all. Thank you.